Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to episode number 7 of the Neighborhood News Network reboot with George Webb. George, how you doing? How you doing today?
Great, Andy. I was in conversation with an old friend named Cynthia McKinney. I've known her, 5 years now, and we have a lot of common friends. She was in the Congress 5 terms, and then was primaried where they, bust in 40,000 Republicans to knock her out after 9/11 because she put Rumsfeld on the grill for forced vaccinations with DynCorp, and she put him on the grill with DynCorp and 9/11 and thing called Tamiflu that Gilead was doing. And so I was talking with her, and I said, well, gosh, we should have you on sometime, and we'll do a show where we prep the audience a little bit on your books and so forth, and give a background, because people don't really they forget that she was the number one person going at anthrax 9/11, and Wolfowitz and Cheney with Halliburton, and Rumsfeld with Tamiflu and Gilead. So, and what that later turns into remdesivir. If you don't stop them at Tamiflu, right, they're going to hit you with disease X again and influenza again. So anyway, that's what I've been doing recently, Andy, is chat with her, and I think we could even. She's halfway around the world. But I think we could get her back on the show and interview her and get her updated thoughts. I think I started my whole series with Cynthia McKinney in 2016, saying, hey, DynCorp and this forced vaccination thing, again, anthrax vaccinations is what she's talking about, and said, this is the root of the disease X crowd. And when you really think about it, and a lot of people have been saying this, George, stop saying coronavirus is the first disease X. The first disease X, where there's a military takeover of the WHO, the first disease X is anthrax. So there you have it.
It was she when you mentioned her name before the show, I didn't know actually too much about Cynthia, so I started to do my usual thing, like trying to do my compound searches into her, like trying to find some bad stuff at first. And then I was like, wait a second, I actually like some of the stuff she's working on. Like her running mate for office back in 2008. She ran for president of the Green Party. Rosa Clemente was like digging into COINTELPRO, infiltrating the Black Panther Party and stuff like that. And that's where, like, I guess her thoughts originated on some of these subjects. But if you can get her on the show, that'd be awesome, George. I'd be more than happy to have her on. But you do have a little video queued up with her. Do you want me to share that for the audience?
Sure. And the reason why I say this is, get ready for it to happen again. She lived through the first disease X, which was anthrax, and she saw the forced vaccinations, and she stood up for it then. And that's why we're doing it now, because we think this is going to happen again. WHO just got done. They all said disease X is coming. Boom, here we go.
And it seemed that everywhere I went for answers, I got that mantra.
And I thought you'd be interested in this. This is the outline of the 911 Recommendations Implementation Act.
Okay.
That's separate from the Terrorist Reform Act.
Okay. Some people are going to ask very safe questions, but someone like me, who's not an insider, who's not looking to be an insider, whose responsibility first and foremost was to the people and not to the system, someone like me is going to want to get to the heart of the matter, to the root, to the truth.
There's a certain political etiquette, I would call it, about what is proper to discuss and not proper. And if it's too difficult, it becomes over the pale. It becomes conspiracy nut stuff. It's not just the information you put out, it's even asking the question, which is not permitted.
Crossfire. On the left, Paul Begala. On the right, Tucker Carlson. Time to reveal our quote of the day. Buckle your seatbelts. This congresswoman is a Democrat from the Atlanta area. She is Cynthia McKinney, and she has a conspiracy theory you won't believe, hopefully. Here's what she told a Berkeley, California radio station. Quote, what did this administration know, and when did it know it about the events of September 11th? Who else knew, and why did they not warn the innocent people of New York who were needlessly murdered? What do they have to hide? End quote. This is how the White House reacted.
All I can tell you is the Congresswoman must be running for the Hall of Fame of the Grassy Knoll Society. I really don't have anything to say that would lend any credibility to what she said.
I never alleged that there was any conspiracy. What I suggested was that there were warnings that came into this administration.
Now is the time for our elected officials to be held accountable. Now is the time for the media to be held accountable. Why aren't the hard questions being asked? We know there were numerous warnings of the events to come on September 11th. Vladimir Putin, president of Russia, delivered one such warning. Those engaged in unusual stock trades immediately before September 11th knew enough to make millions of dollars from United and American Airlines, certain insurance and brokerage firm stocks. What did this administration know, and when did it know it? Who else knew, and why did they not warn the innocent people of New York who were needlessly murdered?
Her words were taken, put through a media mixmaster, and changed around.
Here you have Cynthia McKinney accusing essentially the president of being an accessory to mass murder and doing it for profit.
They bolted together two statements from different parts of a long interview and said, McKinney said, didn't have McKinney on to respond.
We had President Bush place a phone call to Majority Leader Senator Tom Daschle asking him not to investigate the events of September 11th. And then, hot on the heels of the president's phone call was another phone call from the vice president asking that Tom Daschle also not investigate the events that led to September 11th. My question is, what do they have to hide?
The job was quite complete. Cynthia McKinney was accused of saying that George Bush knew all about the September 11th attack in advance, and that he kept it to himself to make sure that his buddies would profit from the wars to come.
I'm an African-American single mom from the state of Georgia. You know, I'm not supposed to question my country. I'm not supposed to question the behavior of my leaders, I suppose.
I mean, I don't care who is president or what it was not the time to do any of that. And that absolutely nailed my respect, killed any respect I ever had for her.
It was a frustrating time for everybody. Somebody's looking for somebody to hate. We've still not caught Osama bin Laden. We couldn't take out that huge tragedy on anybody. So we started taking it out on Muslims, and then we started taking it out on Cynthia McKinney.
I'm asking you to question why my opponent has continued to vote against appropriations for military and intelligence support. If you want to continue to have the liberties that you have, you are going to have to make a sacrifice, just like my parents sacrificed, your parents sacrificed, and if you don't think it's worth it, then you need to move somewhere. And anything Denise Majek says, remember, she's against the minimum wage, she's against affirmative action, she's against reparations.
George, can I pause it just for a second?
Sure. Yeah.
I got a nice little picture of what they're talking about. So apparently, Vladimir Putin November 2000 or in 2000, came and visited town of Crawford, Texas, where George H.W. owned a ranch. And here's a picture. They went to a high school, and he made the comments warning George W. of the Iraq invasion, Saddam Hussein invasion before 9/11 took place. And here's like a nice little picture of both of them looking a little bit younger and a little bit sprier. I wonder how far from Hale County this picture was taken from,
Well, now you live in Texas, so now you can answer all the Texas questions about George Bush. But I find the interesting thing. I'm reading her book, which is "Ain't Freedom Grand," and I changed the title a little bit. I felt, as I always do, I felt like I can change the title to exactly the meaning with what I'm reading the book.
Mm-hmm.
And match the headline. This is a friend of hers who wrote the foreword to the book named Michael Rupert, who had accused the CIA of drug dealing. But I went ahead and made a little change here. Ain't Nothing Like Freedom is the name of her book. And I changed it because I'm reading it. A better title, I think, maybe Ain't Nothing Like the Constitution. Because freedom could mean a lot of different things. But somebody who's kind of a libertarian like she is saying, hey, wait a minute. Either you have the Constitution, and that's the frame under which you do things, A, or B, you suspend the Constitution, you tear up the Constitution, you throw the Constitution away, and then you make up your own rules, whatever the CIA guys want today. But you can't have both. You can't say, well, we'll have a Constitution for you over here. Well, wait a minute, we won't. Now we're going to put in DHS. We'll have a Constitution for you over here. Oh, no, we won't. We'll have the U.S. Patriot Act. Oh, we have a Constitution over here. No. We're going to have the WHO with pandemic authority over you. As a matter of fact, this Constitution kind of sucks, and let's get rid of it. She really is the defender in this book of the Constitution. And I think that's when you hear freedom, freedom sounds like could be freedom bus riders. It could be the Freedom Flotilla going into Gaza. She was on that as well, and she got arrested on that. So freedom could be a lot of things. Could be freedom of speech. Could be freedom, right to bear arms. But this book is really about the Constitution. I think it's her best book. She's written several books, but I think it's her best one.
It is as Carol just put on the screen, one of the things freedom has come to mean is the freedom to be a pirate, steal, plunder, and kill, and that seems to be what our government is currently doing to us. Do you want to continue with that video? I got some.
No. I think I'm good. I'm good with that. I'll just throw up her books there if you want to pick that up, Andy. Just so people can see the different books she's written. She's been an outspoken critic of the wars. She's been an outspoken critic of CIA overthrows in Africa and so forth. Here's her good friend, Michael Rupert, who my brother was somehow connected with Michael Rupert and knew Michael Rupert when he lived in Los Angeles. My brother's kid had been kind of auted, he'd been hit with some kind of thing, and he had an autism, very horrible autism thing hit my brother's kid. And then my brother had sued the CIA guy. It's the highest level guy that's ever gone to jail. I haven't talked to him in a long time, 5 or 6 years, but he knew Michael Rupert.
Rupert was the one that died in like the car accident, right? Where they.
No, I think he shot himself. I talked to the person who owned the farm where he was when he shot himself, supposedly. He was living out on a trailer. I think you're talking about Michael Hastings.
Oh, yeah.
His car accelerated to 180 miles an hour or whatever, and the engine was 200 yards behind the car. Yeah, that happens a lot in a Mercedes. But she also knows Wayne Madsen. She also knows Dan Hopsiker, mutual friends with Greg Palast, the journalist. So we have a lot of mutual friends, and I had sent an email back and forth with Michael Rupert, but I didn't know him as well as my brother did. But he was working this LA thing, Gary Webb thing with Dark Alliance and the Iran-Contra and so forth. So yeah, there's Michael Rupert. I didn't agree with all the things Michael Rupert said. He had this book called Peak Oil, and he was going to say that we're going to run out of oil. So everybody has their own thing. So I don't necessarily, again, on all these things, baby and bathwater. Keep the baby, throw the bathwater out. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I know it's an old expression, but I hear a lot of people saying, I don't agree with what one thing this person says, therefore we have to throw all the babies out. You don't have to throw the babies out. You just throw out the bathwater.
And that leads me into some of the other things that I was sent on Twitter about some of these like patriot groups that I mean, we had this like Patriot Front that was in DC over the weekend. We've seen the FBI at January 6th. They have some informants with the Proud Boys and some of I forget the name of some of these other freedom fighter groups. We've also had the Gretchen Whitmer scheme going on with the people kidnapping her. And there's this PATCON, this here, let me pull up the it's called the FBI Secret War Against the Patriot Movement and How Infiltration Tactics Relate to Radicalizing Influences. I got this from the JSTOR website, so it seems pretty legit. They stopped doing this type of work for like a decade or so, and it seems like they ramped it back up in the past years. Is that what we're seeing with what Cynthia McKinney's talking about here? This PATCON, FBI infiltrating the Patriot groups?
Well, I think that's certainly going to be pay dirt. The CIA basically, infiltrated using the FBI Counterintelligence Division 5 as the local field office in Washington being the first one. And that's why they cleaned out the McDuffs of the world, right? And that became the, footprint inside of the United States to start running these operations. So we have, after Kennedy's dead now, COINTELPRO, which is basically low intensity warfare by making sure you don't get any jobs, getting you fired from your current job, making sure your kids can't go to college, et cetera. Doing all kinds of things around the house to create all kinds of disturbances around your house, having your major HVAC system fail, just a million different things, having people harass you when you're in public places. This is all part of COINTELPRO. But in the 60s, and this worked very effectively against people like the Black Panthers and so forth. Ted Gunderson talks about this with the FBI. But what I have said is that the DARPA said, how do we scale up COINTELPRO? How do we get to the point where everybody is a victim of COINTELPRO? Simultaneously using everything we've learned in any particular instance and use against the whole. This is where AI comes in. This is where AI is going to be used to say, let's take our learnings from each individual situation and then multiply that and scale that across. And so the internet went from this place of freedom, this free voice of freedom, especially after 9/11, right? Because it didn't exist before then, really. 97, 98 is when it kind of came into being. Now, more people get their news from the internet than get their news from mainstream media. The old broadcast television's gone almost completely, and the Tucker Carlsons are hanging on, the old MSM guys are hanging on by their fingernails. And it's guys like us and a lot of channels like us that is the real mainstream news. So they have to come after not just people going to the meetings with this PATCON, right? That's for general dossiering of people who are more activists. But they have to come up with a solution for the Andy Dybalas of the world and the George Webbs. They have to have an AI solution for there. So those are the things we're out there looking at. For instance, pandemics, disease X, right? First one being anthrax, right? I think they're all maybe anthrax. It's coronathorax, flu thorax. I think they always have an X on the end. But what's the next disease X that's going to hit us? That's a scalable technology. So anytime I'm looking at these things, I'm always looking at how are they going to scale the technology? What are they going to learn at January 6th that they can then put in the algorithm and make it an AI tool to scale it against everyone?
So these things keep getting ramped up over and over, like over time. It's not just we do one and we stop. It's like, all right, we learned our lesson. We're at the University of Central Florida. We throw it in the simulator. We do some actual on the ground live exercises as well. But yeah, you were just getting into Disease X, and you wrote an article, Disease X clock is counting down. So our presidential contenders. Do you want to get into that a little bit? And this is on George's Substack, by the way, ladies and gentlemen.
Sure, georgewebb.substack.com. You can see here that the WHO has gone from a cooperative, kind of group of nations, sort of like a volunteer fire department, and everyone helping each other across nations and boundaries, to now a military organization where NATO's in there. They're going to have planes. They're going to have U.S. Armed Diplomatic Security Services. They're going to enforce these contracts. And they're trying to get these nations to voluntarily sign away their sovereignty to say that at any point in the future, we're allowing WHO to declare your country a pandemic area, which means we take over. Our emergency procedures take over. Your parliament can go on vacation. Your Supreme Court can go on vacation. Your military can go on vacation. We are taking over. And again, I was in Geneva for 2 weeks, 2 years ago when it mattered. And so we've studied these things a long time. And the key people that are behind this are the Disease X people. This is a tool of lockdown. This is a tool of repression. This is a tool of subjugation, right? And this, we've looked at this Klaus Stohr, S-T-O-H-R. He's the pandemic guru for the WHO. He's the one who put in early surveillance, which again is a kind of sentinel activity that militaries do. He's the one who put in the rapid response force. That's sort of things that military does with a rapid deployment force. And just to show you the background here, we've identified the people who wrote the predictive documents as this thing was transitioning from a civilian body over to a military body, called the R&D blueprint. It's the blueprint for NATO to take over the WHO. And we talked not only about this thing in general, we said, hey, it's Jeremy Farrar and this person named Virginia Benassi. And we talked about, this is 2 years old now, but we talked about all the disease X's that they could do. You can see all of those look like mosquitoes that are biting the face of Virginia Benassi, right? This is how they're going to do it. It's going to be one of these things. And Andy, as I said, it's always in places that are the most strategic places in the world. Like in this case, for the Dutch, the Straits of Malacca and the oil of Sumatra and Java and Indonesia, all the islands of Indonesia are the most important Dutch possessions. Isn't it interesting? That's the first place you see the leap from H5N1 from chickens over to humans. You go down to the end of the Malay Peninsula, and that's Singapore. That's the old British trade port of Singapore, the Pottinger family owning that. Isn't that interesting that the first breakout of H5N1, Singapore and Hong Kong, his other British protectorate. Wuhan is yet another trade concession of the old Pottinger family. And Matt Pottinger's not at the beginning of just 2001 or 2020, and 2019, arguably, for the SARS-CoV-2, which is coronavirus, but also back at SARS in 2003. So we show you this history, and we show you a lot of graphs like Andy's so good at on our show. We show you this history, and then we kind of plot out, based on past information, here's what we think is going to happen. So if you scroll down now, there's a great map. You'll see Hong Kong has been, again, Andy, if you're trying to keep hold of your possessions and you're Matt Pottinger and your ancestor is Lord Pottinger and you've had 300 years of opium trade, that's where you want new novel viruses to happen, especially ones that you have the vaccine to and the bad guys don't, right? And you can see the litany of flus that have broken out in just Hong Kong.
What area are you trying to take over? It'd be nice if the population got decimated before you sent the soldiers in,
Asiatic flu 57, Hong Kong flu 68, again with 97 with Hong Kong with H5N1. That's why we say H5N1 and influenza, and this guy named Storr, who put in all these repressive military schemes for the NATO to take over the WHO. So this just is some receipts here in the piece that I do. Give you another little map of Hong Kong and another way to look at it, divide it between mainland China and China, the Pottinger estate here, if you will. And this is not something I'm dreaming up, right? These are the WHO people that just a day ago have said, disease X is coming. We know. It's just a matter of time, and the time is now. Right. So I don't get to choose. I don't, as a journalist, we don't get to choose. We have to help the people who listen to our program and forward our program to other people. We have to help them with the actual receipts and let them make up their mind here. But you can see here, this is yesterday's article that they're talking about imminent disease X.
And it is, and we've said it time and time again. It's a operation it's a worldwide operation, and we've seen this we were just talking about this PATCON. Sorry, I was trying to pull up the name and I couldn't think of the name or couldn't find my article, and so I was just stuttering my way through that question. Now to the point where I forget what question I was going to ask.
Try doing this, Andy. Just practice doing.
I do pretty well most of the show, but that time
you do great. You do great.
I was just struggling right there to figure out.
But have you ever done that where you're trying to type something and you're trying to listen to a question and you're also trying to speak at the same? It doesn't work.
That's me the entire show, George Webb. I'm trying to search for articles. I'm trying to pull stuff up. I'm trying to get your articles going while I'm listening to you. It's a tough job out here, but we got to bear with me sometimes. But
it's fun. Yeah.
Is this the NATO controlling like the U.S., or is the U.S. in control of NATO? Who's actually in control of things here? Is it Ukraine in control of everything? We see them dumping money all over the place.
This is NATO. This is NATO in control of Washington. And I wrote about it 3 years ago. It's called the Washington NATO Project. It's based in Norfolk, Virginia. I produced all the receipts. This is as real as as it gets here. The Washington NATO Project is a plan, if there is a pandemic, that NATO would eventually be the enforcement arm of a WHO Disease X proclamation. Not yet. We're not there yet. It's going to be U.S. State Department diplomatic services until people accept NATO, and I don't think they ever will, especially if we keep highlighting it. But that's the plan. The Washington NATO Project lays all this out, basically giving up national sovereignty, right, for emergency situations. And again, this is the same lesson of 9/11. Hey, if you don't like the Constitution, create a mass formation psychosis situation, create a continuity of government situation. Then you can throw the Constitution out and you can do whatever you want. That's great. What if, your kids could do that, right? You could say, well, I don't like your rules today, so I'm going to press the no rules button. They'd be pressing it all the time, right? That's the button we're giving them. They can press the no rules button anytime they want.
And we see here on the screen that the Washington NATO Project was started by 4 U.S. think tanks to generate new ideas and thinking about the transatlantic community's role in a changing global security environment. And this started in the fall 2008, and the 4 U.S. think tanks are the Atlantic Council of the United States, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, the Center for Technology and National Security Policy at the National Defense University, and the Center for Transatlantic Relations at Johns Hopkins University. And John, I just wanted to say that to kind of highlight that Johns Hopkins University, because that's where Event 201 and this last version of Disease X was birthed out of. So I think you're right on point with this Washington NATO Project and these think tanks and where these ideas are coming out of.
Yeah, and it reminds you of the old Rhodes circle, the circle of trust, the Rhodesian round table, the Rhodes round table, where we say we're going to make a university in America, we're going to call it Yale, and that university is going to be dedicated to reestablishing British domination over America. Not kidding, right? The original founding documents of Yale say that, right? So that's the CIA, and all of these things are giving away American sovereignty, undoing the American Revolution, undoing the U.S. Constitution, and accepting a foreign power to have dominion. Right? Oh, what are we going to give back? Lord Fairfax's land and Washington's tobacco farms next? I mean, that's the world. That's their thinking, and it's easy to go to the Dutch Royal Court and Royal Dutch Shell. They're the majority shareholders, and say, you know what? Kissinger says this. You guys need to get your old trade routes back. You guys were the first through the Straits of Malacca with a modern ship. You need to get those back. Hey, Matt Pottinger, you need to get the old drug routes back that we started at Yale way back with Skull and Bones, which was a front organization for opium, for the opium trade. You need to get those back, right? And here's the international treaty, and you have grandfather's rights. That's what's happening, right? And they're just using these various front artifices and so forth in order to reset the game back to when they were winning, right? And we can't let that happen.
NATO 2030 towards a new strategic concept and beyond. And this is on John Hopkins' website. And apparently they have the Henry A. Kissinger Center for Global Affairs at Johns Hopkins. if that explains this whole little project going on at all. It's little Henry Kissinger always has to have his little touch on everything,
Well, and he's an Oxfordian. I mean, he's right out. He could have easily slipped into the Cambridge Five debating society with Victor Rothschild or Jacob Rothschild after that. He moves quite well in these elite circles because he knows how they think and he knows what they respond to. Hey, we'll use the intelligence organizations to get your stuff back. We'll use the intelligence organization to get you more stuff. Do we have a green light? Let us worry about it. You guys just sit back and play polo, right? We're gonna go get it for you. And that's basically the story of the 20th century and so far in the 21st century. It's the people who actually can expose that. Remember, in any situation, diagnosis is 99% of the problem, right? Cancer, right? You say, well, somewhere on your body has the tumor. I'm going to just start in with this boring machine into your eye. And we'll keep making boreholes, and eventually we're going to get the tumor, right? That's what so many of these people who talk about, WHO, or they talk about the IRC, or they talk about these general concepts, general organizations. They don't get to the person. If you don't say Klaus Storr is the guy who put in these things, then you're missing it. You're saying, let's just have indiscriminate cancer surgery. We have to be very precise, just like we would be if we had precision cancer surgery. And that exposure is 99% of the problem. Our problem in the freedom movement or the liberty movement or the constitutional movement or whatever, the libertarian movement, whatever you want to call it, the problem is we're imprecise. And because mainly journalists are lazy, right? They're not precise, and we have to put our finger right on it and say, this is the guy right here. Bang, that's the guy that we got to watch. Because then when he makes a move, then we can anticipate what's going to happen. We don't want to watch the whole city or the whole country. Everybody who's in the State Department. Great. Thanks a lot. That really focuses us down, right? Or everybody at Lockheed, everybody in the military industrial complex. That's 400 companies and then 150,000 employees. But give me your money. Give me the cash. I'll be the one who'll figure it out. You just send me the cash. I'll just say military industrial complex. We can't have that. We have to have very energetic, deep journalism, deep research.
And here's also someone that I don't know why it pulls up, but Sorry, we're on the subject of.
Well, pull up whatever comment you like, Andy. The world's your oyster here.
I had a little video ready, but I don't know. It's
Sure.
not on my. I don't know.
We'll transition.
Whatever.
Whatever
No,
you want.
it's what we were talking about. It has to do with Penny Pritzker and in Ukraine joining Burisma, or not Burisma, the EU and NATO. We're talking about the NATO expansion here, and Penny Pritzker at the World Economic Forum was just talking about that. And I know you've spoken about her in the past, but I'll play the video and let
Or
you.
how about her husband going to the island for DNA, with Epstein's Island for DNA longevity and DNA immortality and DNA cancer vaccines? Her
Oh, that
husband.
was the same Pritzker?
Yep, that's her husband.
So the Southern Research Institute was actually servicing this Pritzker's husband. I didn't make that connection.
There you go.
Here we go.
Long-term pathway into the EU and NATO. And that combination is extremely powerful when it comes to reconstruction. Then you add on top of it the world's richest soil that's capable of feeding the world and inexpensive IT specialization. And you add those capabilities, you add all those qualities together, that makes this a particularly compelling situation. The challenge, of course, is we're in the middle of a war. So we've got to deal, of course, with the first situation before we can deal with the past, but we don't have to wait. The situation in Ukraine, the way I think about it, and it's because I'm a runner, I think about it as a sprint and a marathon. And, the goal is a long-term, sustainable, digital, clean, competitive European Ukraine integrated into global markets. That's the marathon.
So you're talking about that NATO expansion, the United Nations expansion. That's all they're trying to get. Ukraine's the richest soil in the world, she says, and they're trying to expand it into the rest of to prosperity, I guess, for everyone.
Well, I might not be on the same ideological spectrum as Cynthia McKinney, in terms of being kind of anti-Israel. I mean, I've been pro-Israel in terms of right to exist and pro-Israel in terms of right to defend itself and want my kids to serve in the IDF, last democracy or the only democracy in the Middle East, etc. But here she has a point, because at what point do you stop defending your island, the size of New Jersey, right, a small country, right, which has been attacked many times and now has a lot of U.S. defense aid, okay? At what point do you stop doing that and now you start trying to tame the tiger that's expanding? Gaza is an expansion, right? The Sinai is an expansion. A new Ben Gurion pipeline along the Gaza border would be an expansion, et cetera, et cetera. At what point now Chabad Lubavitch taking a swath of Ukraine, basically giving the Nazis the west half from the Dnieper and the Chabad with Kolomoisky the east half. Well, let's take it all the way to what Catherine the Great says: go all the way from the Black Sea to the Baltic, the Pale. We get all of that. Well, how about the Washington NATO project? I mean, we should have a foothold in Washington. We should be able to take over the goings on in Washington with our NATO country now, because we want to make this country a NATO country so that it'll have self-determination and it'll have a mutual peace agreement so Russia will never be able to invade us. Kolomoisky wants this new state of Kolomoisky in eastern Ukraine, and he wants it to be part of NATO so that he doesn't worry about defending it. But then he can start sending his Azov troops. Instead of undercover with the orange hats on January 6th, now they can just come in and terrorize our people during elections and so forth, or spray our people. Remember, the first thing Cynthia McKinney is talking about is DynCorp spraying in Central America. First thing she's talking about is DynCorp and DynPort spraying an anthrax-like substance for the war against drugs in Central America. That's what we open ourselves up to. This is why I followed and partied with or at least acted like I was partying with the Ukraine guys, with the Azov guys when they would come off to Turkey or come off to Poland, and watching them and seeing all the, girlfriends they're bringing, the supermodels they're bringing out of the country and so forth. They're not doing any fighting. not doing any fighting. They come and go as they please. What they do is go back and intimidate people to sign up for the army so they can go die. They go in and intimidate 14-year-old boys in classes and some girls to get them to go to the front. They go to old age homes and kick people out of their houses because Kolomoisky wants the houses because he wants the land, and they make them go to the front and die. Right? That's what's happening in Ukraine. So Penny Pritzker, who's from Chicago, and I know her from Chicago, is one of those people who's putting out this garbage, who gives a damn about your running, and it's a sprint or a marathon. What about the Minsk Accords? Let's stop with Runner's World today, and let's start talking about why don't we honor the Minsk Accords that you signed? You guys drafted these things. Why aren't we living up to them? But they're trying to spin this into some yarns, thinking that they can basically allow for an invasion force under our own treaty that we signed, the Washington NATO agreement. They want us to sign this to allow Kolomoisky to send people over here and operatives anytime they like.
And here's a little article on the screen. Amentum team provides reward support to Ukraine, and Amentum is now DynCorp. So DynCorp got bought out by Amentum a couple years back. So they're definitely over in Ukraine, offering their support along with a lot of these other military contractors that you're getting into, like Lockheed Martin as well. So, and if you get into DynPort and DynCorp and the fact that they have a vaccine division and they're here with like soldiers around the world, do you think Amentum and DynPort are helping vaccinate these soldiers or within NATO as well?
Well, if I see Amentum's just a name change for DynCorp. If I see DynCorp's been around since the first days of the CIA, I think it's probably for the F-16s that we gave them, or the Dutch F-16s. These guys are probably, engine guys or spare parts guys, inventory type guys. Chain of supply for Air Force, especially fighters that have a lot of moving parts and a lot of wear and tear, high G forces and stuff. You got to have a supply chain, and if you have somebody who doesn't know supply chain, you missed one little part, now you're grounded. It sounds silly, but it's true. And so I would say that those are probably supply chain guys. Now there could be a couple of spray guys in there too. I see Illustrate for Life asked the question about Norfolk. Have I ever heard of Kay Griggs? Yes. I watched all 6 of those long Kay Griggs interviews. And I definitely think those activities go on with compromising our top 5 stars and 4 stars. Absolutely I do.
So I'm not sure who Kay Griggs is. Can you give me?
She's a whistleblower. Yeah, she's a whistleblower who was married. I think she's dead now, but she was married to a colonel in Washington, and then they, a Marine who was in the circle in amongst all these parties that they would have for the generals and so forth. It was just a big compromise opportunity. Tail hook every year for the Navy was all about compromise, just compromising all of these officers while they're still ship drivers, so that when they go to the Pentagon, you can always pull out the old tail hook videos and say, you know what, we really would like another $200 billion today for Ukraine, and I'd hate to publish the tail hook videos, or you could just say tail hook. You just have a guy walk by the congressman right before the vote and go tail hook.
Mm-hmm. They know what's going on.
Yeah, and then they would know. Ooh, oopsie. I think I'm voting for another $200 million for Kolomoisky today.
Yeah, if Nancy Pelosi blows her nose or adjusts her pants, who to vote for. They have little signs and stuff. But Dave
I don't
Underdog.
want to think about Nancy adjusting her pants.
So here we got Dave Underdog. Why do you say Jack Lew and Tim Geithner are so important to focus on? Question mark.
Well, I don't talk about Tim Geithner that much. Jack Lew's important because he's the guy who, with the phones, any kind of covert operation where you're not, when you're on top, right, and you have 90% of the soldiers, and you have a counterinsurgency force that's 2%, right? Then you don't have to worry so much about covert communications. You own the radio station. You can have big Memorial Day flags and all that and parades, and you don't have to really worry so much. But when you're the 2%, if you're outed, you're dead. They're going to come get you that day, right? So if you don't have encrypted communications, especially military grade, you're screwed. Jack Lew's the key guy who got these folks military grade encryption, right? PTEC was the name of the company, and that was the company that went through the World Trade Center, and they did a big data, the giant sucking sound of all the data, right? And that group was funded by PTEC, and a lot of those same BlackBerries end up going on to other operations on Capitol Hill. And again, I always say it's the black bag. Believe Taggart when he says, this Marine who saw the BlackBerries with the official markings, it's a black bag of BlackBerries, and they go from operation to operation. And Andy, you're not Andy Dybala, and I'm not George Webb in a covert network. You're AB, and I'm GW, or not even that. So they can't figure out our names. And that's how these things are done. And that's why Jack Lew's so important. It's PTEC and 9/11. And that's probably the first disease X, by the way. The first disease X is probably done with military grade encrypted communications as well. And would had to have come from Jack Lew in the Treasury. I actually had somebody who worked with Jack Lew and worked in the Treasury and was sort of a whistleblower tell me that. I remember where I was in the Bronx when they told me. So, it's not something I got a theory. No, somebody who said, hey, those BlackBerries you're talking about aren't just for the Imran Awan running Operation New Dawn in Afghanistan and, bringing all the anthrax technology back, to Israel. It's also goes back to 9/11 and 1999, all the way back to 1999. And that was really an eye opener for me. I remember exactly where I was in the Bronx when that person called me and told me that.
There's a Hamish talking about something about Yale's 1976 charter revision. I'm not sure what that question is referring.
Well,
can you provide a screenshot showing whichever part of Yale's charter indicates seeking to, in effect, take back the U.S.? Thanks so much. Appreciated.
Yeah. Look at the first president of Yale, and look at the original first president of Yale, and that'll give you your answer. And it could be an implicit task, sort of like re-Oxfordize, America, that sort of thing. But my point here is Yale is, what do you got there, Andy? I can't quite see.
First president of Yale. I don't know if you're being literal.
No, I am being literal. If you do a Wikipedia search on the first president of Yale, we did a search on this. I'm not sure it's Abram Pearson or not. If you click on that past presidents and
here's Pearson was the first president.
Yeah, and I can run this down a little bit earlier, but you're going to see that Skull and Bones was a whole bunch of second sons that weren't affiliated with England that wanted to run opium. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Delano's grandfather, was involved in this. And it was a secret society to get the opium trade. All of the Ivy Leagues, all of the Ivy League colleges before the United States ever existed were built with opium money, right? They were built by second sons who weren't going to inherit anything in England. And now they're second sons. They're British citizens, right? And they're making money, and they're competing with the old British with this faster clipper ships. And there's this battle going back and forth, right? Why are we having battles in the war, in the French-American War? Why are we having naval battles off the coast of South America? Because the only way the opium could get here was around the Horn of South America, right? French and Indian War, wasn't that about all the Indians and Daniel Day-Lewis, and he had the buckskins, and it was about Kentucky? Why are we having naval battles on the opium trade?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because these guys were doing opium. And it was sort of like the second son. Hey, I'm not going to get any land back in England, but I'm going to be richer than you ever thought of being, older brother. I'm going to be richer than you ever thought of being, right? Because I'm going to run opium. And that's where Skull and Bones was created. Pure, plain and simple. That's where Skull and Bones was created. And run it all the way through to George H.W. Bush, right? This is the running thread. This is why I say these are going to be the same people that do weird testing of anthrax as a gene therapy at Sandy Hook, right? This is why all the kids are going to have weird genetic problems with their spinal cord that they didn't have when they were little kids, right? They get in that school and all of a sudden now they got these genetic problems in their neural tube. Why is that? It's something happening in that room, something happening in that air filter, right? It's the same time Jordan Walker's going to Yale. It's the same time Karl Rove's kissing Jordan Walker on the forehead, or Jordan Walker's kissing Karl Rove on the forehead. I can't remember who kissed who. But this is what I'm saying is they're going to test things that are in their interest, not our interest. How are all 26 kids killed? They all have neural tube deficiencies or malignancies that happen after they're growing up, right? And then they're all killed, and then none of them go to the local hospital. They all go to Yale Medical School. Why? Why are the Yale people the first people to immediately be able to diagnose Adam Lanza, and they're not even there? It's 40 miles away. Why are all the first victims of anthrax, a stone's throw away from this school? Did Adi Lundgren know the background of the testing that was going on at Sandy Hook? As a program, Sandy Hook isn't for 11 years later. It's sort of a cleanup on I one. This is why I think Scott Pelley goes after me. And 60 Minutes goes after me 2 days before January 6th, because they don't want anyone looking into the neural deficiencies and maybe the anthrax testing being used as a gene therapy. They don't want anybody looking into that at Sandy Hook. They'd rather say, okay, let's have Alex say something wacky and then just say George said what Alex said and Alex didn't say it, right? Why else would they do that? Why else would they go with a heavy hitter like Scott Pelley in 60 Minutes if they didn't want to knock that down, this whole line of inquiry? I can't quite read this other than the Americans who made opium profits.
Yeah, so I was just going to read part of it. The Americans who made money from opium and where the profits went. It's short and quick, so just bear with me. In the capitalist world,
take your time, Andy. Take your time.
There's a saying, others' misfortune is my happiness. When China focused on preventing Britain from smuggling opium, the U.S. used this weak point as an opportunity. The accumulation of considerable wealth enabled the industrialization and development of social overhead capital in the United States, and those who took part in this became wealthy in the U.S. The representative families of this case are the Roosevelt family and the Forbes family. A representative person of the Roosevelt family was Warren Delano. Delano was the maternal grandfather of Franklin Roosevelt, the 32nd president of the U.S. He worked for Russell & Co., the largest Chinese trading company in the U.S. at the time. Russell bought Perkins & Co., the leading Chinese trading company at the time, from John P. Cushing in 1824. John Murray Forbes was involved in this. Forbes' son was a great-grandfather of John Kerry, a former U.S. Democratic Party presidential candidate and former Secretary of State W.E.F. Henchman. Delano was appointed as U.S. consul, blah, blah, blah. But here's the last part I wanted to point out: the powerful legacy of opium money. Much of the land in the development fund of Yale University, the Lowell Memorial Library of Columbia University, and Princeton University, 3 buildings financed by the largest scale donation at the time, also benefited from opium profits. The Council on Foreign Relations was also funded by opium smugglers and their heirs. Last December, the U.S. House of Representatives passed a bill to legalize cannabis sales. It is noteworthy to see whether the government will use the collected 5% consumption tax for good causes. So I guess they're just digging more into the Yale and stuff. But the Council on Foreign Relations heirs were opium smugglers as well.
Sorry about that. Yeah, and the Atlantic Council is also part of this group with the idea that we shouldn't have a battle between the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds over this, pharmaceutical trade, let's just call it legal and illegal. We shouldn't have this international battle because it causes the teeter-totter to swing in unpredictable ways. We should have a body that works all this stuff out together, and it's the Atlantic Council. They want to control the politics. They want to control the investments of DARPA. They want to put the money into force multipliers like bioagents. You can see this over and over again in all their simulations. They want to put NATO in control of the WHO, right? The Rockefeller and the Rothschild interests want to put their people as forward as young global leaders. None of this is surprising to anyone. But the thing, here's your Afghanistan. Here you go, Andy.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just showing it's still about the opium. George Bush, 9/11, going to Iraq. There's Marines. I don't know if they're protecting the fields, but they weren't doing much about it.
They're protecting the old warlords. I mean, this is the Golden Triangle, right? The warlords, which were, you're a warlord, I'm a warlord, sort of like on a county-wide basis that what the Taliban had. That's where the Taliban has all their money. Right? This is the big guys coming in later and going, hey, wait a minute, we're going to take that trade for ourselves. Right? And so the whole Afghan war, at the end of the day, is in this northern area of Afghanistan taking over this opium trade. And this is this, again, if you don't talk to the soldiers, like the guys walking along the opium here, you'll never know that. No Donnie O'Sullivan at CNN or Jake Tapper or Anderson Cooper will ever tell you that that's what this war was about, right? It's about a lot of other things. I think they test a lot of bioagents like anthrax, like coronaviruses, like influenzas and so forth. So they do a lot of that. But I'm saying that's one of the goal stacking here, right? That's one of the things they do. But certainly the drug trade was a big part of Afghanistan, no question, and Iraq as well.
And what about, as I have right here, the growing importance of Ukraine as a transit country for heroin trafficking, U.S.-Ukraine Research Partnership? Is that a little bit of what it's about in Ukraine as well? It's one of those countries that's kind of in the middle of everything, and there's some
we started this in 2016 and then 2017 once we got the Blackberries. Again, the drug dealers were the ones that were using PGP, right? Pretty good privacy, and they were running this. And we talked about Mogilevich in Crimea and how this was going to spin over to Kolomoisky. So this is the international drug traffic. It makes sense that they would want to go clean. It would make sense that they would want to rinse and launder their dirty money with overthrow so that they can then get clean money with oil and gas or with rare metals or with uranium or precious metals. So it just makes so much sense that you'd have a Humpty Dumpty society in the U.S. Congress. So, I don't want to go back too far. Peter Duke does a good job in his book talking about, or his next book, Reframing Reality. He really gets into the whole, the whole Rhodes wanting Yale to be sort of to recapture the United States and undo the revolution and so forth. And the whole idea of the Civil War is we'll foment rhetoric on both sides and get the two to fight against each other. Then we'll swoop in with a reconstituted constitution. And then we'll end up breaking up all the financial interests with various depressions and cycles. And then we'll buy things up for pennies on the dollar through companies, proxies like Cromwell and Sullivan and Allen Dulles and so forth, and Union Bank with the Bushes. And that's kind of what happened. If you look at these financial crises, it's really a shift. These are $1 billion, $1 trillion sometimes shifts of cash over to these Atlantic Council interests. This is why Cynthia McKinney is saying, well, why are you calling Daschle to shut down the investigation? If we're trying to look for the people who did this to us, why are we lobbing calls into Daschle to say, do not investigate 9/11? Why is the vice president, Dick Cheney, calling him and saying, don't investigate 9/11? Why is he getting anthrax letters and he thinks his life is in danger? And they clear out the whole Russell or Ford office building and put him in fear of his life because he's not signing the Patriot Act, and he's not saying we shouldn't investigate 9/11, right? And this is, again, I'm not saying it's all skull and bones. Peter Duke's much more, hey, it's all skull and bones. You can trace all this back. It's the poison of the fruit of the poisonous tree. If you plant a bad seed that's all based on opium money, the only thing you're going to get off of it is opium apples, right? That's his theory. I'm not saying that particularly, but I am saying that you heard the running theme here with Alan Dulles and the Rockefellers and so forth, is the same interests are involved in using these bioagents to go get the oil fields, and they're using the gas, all the way going back to Bayer in World War I, to get the oil fields and get the gas fields. That's the key here. And they're the ones who are investing in these new bioagents weapons. Now they're down to CRISPR. These are much more specific weapons now, where you can target down to the individual genome, right? And that's why they're doing it, right? So that's the big message here. I'm not a big skull and bones guy. I went there to the tomb. I went to Yale a couple of times. I was really trying to figure out what the hell's going on with these kids with their spinal thing, right? When I went to Sandy Hook, and why is everybody going to Yale for spinal and spinal taps and CSF fluids? Are they trying to, what's the biomarker? What's the biomarker in the spinal fluid that I'm missing for autism? Is there a spinal fluid biomarker for autism? I'm literally asking myself those questions. There you go, Andy. 322.
I'm just holding up the disease X for the skull and bones.
Yeah.
If you're into symbolism, that does. I don't mean to keep backing Peter, but it is a bit obvious sometimes when you just look at it.
Yeah. I mean, I get you. I get you. I have
a dead person with an X over the bones. If that ain't disease X coming up on your doorstep,
it'd be hard to argue with you.
But so in the news last week, I saw that Alex Jones was reporting about this Ebola vaccine in Denver and stuff, and I did kind of start looking it up last night, and it does seem to be true that the Ebola vaccine has been used on the Ebola nurses. There's videos and some news commentary about, like, even with videos of them getting the injections. What are your thoughts on Ebola maybe being the next disease X, or is this just part of them trying to mitigate some of this? I know Denver, my brother lives out there. There's a lot of immigration going on right now. Is this trying to just mitigate that a little bit with the immigrants coming in? They might have Ebola. They're coming from these third world countries, so the nurses are getting the vaccine. What's going on here, George Webb?
Well, you can play the video. You might want to play the video so everybody knows what we're talking about. I thought we might have played it last time, but
I think our show kind of went over and we got off, and I didn't end up bringing it up. But here's a video of the
Go ahead.
The jab.
A few medical employees at Denver Health made history today. They became some of the first people to get the live Ebola vaccine for preventative measures.
You've likely heard of Ebola, a rare but deadly disease. Back in 2014, there was a major outbreak in West Africa that did lead to some cases here in the United States. 9 News reporter Jaleesa Irizarry sharing with us why a medical team here in Colorado are some of the first to get the vaccine.
Go ahead and take her back to the room where we were set up. Yeah. Okay.
So much of a hospital is procedural.
Hello.
But nothing is routine when the doctor is the patient.
And we're like fun people, right?
Dr. Maria Frank is eager today to take on something
exciting
and even a little momentous.
Historic, yeah.
Dr. Frank is getting the Ebola vaccine today.
Little folk.
Denver Health says they're the first high infection medical team to get it as a preventative measure.
And there we are.
They're one of 13 centers in the U.S. that can care for Ebola patients.
Just like that.
Although right now, the likelihood is low.
And even though there's no current outbreaks happening in the world, we want to make sure that people have the chance to be protected in case we need to care for a patient that has a disease with a mortality potentially of 70%.
In 2014, the largest Ebola epidemic started in West Africa. A few cases trickled into the United States. 11 people were treated. Just one person died. The FDA approved the first vaccine 5 years later.
Ebola has a very high mortality rate, so it's exciting to be a part of this next step in treating this disease.
Elizabeth Lenz is another recipient today. She's a Denver health paramedic. That's also part of the high-risk infection team. She helps transport highly infectious patients that need care at the treatment center.
All right.
Today, she can do that with a little peace of mind.
It burns a little bit in the shoulder, but it's all right.
Knowing she's now protected.
Exactly.
Lenz hopes this vaccine turns the calendar to the next era, one with more treatment and less tragedy.
We're advancing and finding a way to actually prevent this.
As for
All right, George Webb, what are your thoughts on the Ebola vaccine and being applied in Colorado?
Well, I think they're not really worried about immigrants as much as they are worried about a test environment. There's 17 of these centers, these first rapid response centers. And again, your rapid response centers, again, look back to the WHO laying out the plan for Stohr. Klaus Stohr, it's Klaus Schwab knows what's in store for you because he knew all about the Great Reset 1. And they seem to have left now Davos, and they know all about what's in store for you with disease X2, right? If you look at that technology, it's the rapid response group of 17 hospitals, and they're trying to get your acceptance because, hey, isn't it great that these people are coming in, they're getting the shot, and what's great? The thing they're not telling you, Andy, is that there is a BSL-4 lab that they put out there with Colorado Springs. It's part of the Super Soldier program. They're going to be looking at recombinant vaccines because the recombinant vaccines, the artificial recombinant vaccines, have been such a failure, right? With the DNA vaccines like Vical and DNA vaccines like Inovio, even with electroporation as a little hamburger helper to get them in the cells, they're going to go back to the live viral vectors because they're going to try to figure out how the live viral vectors are. So you pick something that's successful in terms of a viral vector, in terms of programming a cell. VSV is the virus they chose, vesicular stromal virus. VSV is the platform. And then just like Bruce Ivins did, he isolated the gene that they want for Ebola. They put it into the VSV, and that becomes your recombinant technology. And because it doesn't work with their imitations of nature, they're going back to nature. So to me, this is more a, well, there's those crazy kids out there at Denver Health preparing to make sure that you're going to be safe from all these immigrants coming in. With Ebola, that's not how Ebola spreads. It spreads with bodily fluids. No, it's actually they're working out there at Colorado Springs in the Super Soldier Project, in the Human Performance Laboratory there that Reagan started. And they're looking at this recombinant technology, and they cannot figure out how to do it, right? It is, I agree with Mark Kulak to this extent. It is about gene therapy. Follow the Vicals and follow the Inovios and follow this military industrial complex thread here, trying to imitate nature. And they're trying. So wherever you see people getting vaccinated, that's a good indicator that that lab is working on that particular thing. I went to Marburg. Cynthia McKinney believes that Marburg was added, and also Congo Crimea hemorrhagic fever, or maybe Ebola was added to the list of things for the PrEP Act. So it could be Marburg. It could be, Congo, Crimea. All these hemorrhagic fevers, what they do is sort of like the Sandy Hook kids with the spinal infusion. They break down the body's natural barriers. So you have a spinal column like this, and you have this durable layer called the dura. You got to drill through the dura to get in there, to get the anthrax into the spinal column. Same thing is true with Ebola. Your blood vessels are like this. You got to get the blood out of the blood vessels. So you got to create holes, right? You got to create holes, right? That's what Ebola does. So the probable mechanism of action, and I don't know exactly what it is, but the probable mechanism of action is block it. block it from creating those holes. So I don't know what you have up here, Eddie. Can you read that?
It says single host gene may hold key to treating both Ebola and anthrax infections. So this is them trying to work on the universal vaccines at the Fort Detrick there.
Can you read that?
You want me to read the actual article?
Oh, well, at least the abstract, if you'd be
Okay.
so kind.
Here is the I guess the summary. New research indicates that a minor reduction in levels of one particular gene known as CD45 can provide protection against two divergent microbes, the virus that causes Ebola hemorrhagic fever and the bacterium that causes anthrax. Taken together, the results suggest a common host restriction factor and a promising approach to drug development for treating two completely different infections. Do you want me to get into it a little bit?
Yeah, you can get into it a little bit. CD45 is interesting. I see somebody in the chat saying the kids were killed, folks, at Sandy Hook. He had help. Adam Lanza couldn't tie his shoes. Okay, from everything I heard of him, he couldn't make his bed. If you asked him what's for lunch, he'd say, "What is lunch?" I mean, this kid isn't writing the Patriots manifesto or anything like that. He had help, right? Which means it's cleanup on aisle 7, right? And the kids were not quite normal. They had been sort of like my nephew, had been back injured or something. They were normal, and you see a lot of pictures of the kids when they're normal, but look at the later pictures of Adam Lanza. He also was a victim of this. Look at the later pictures of Adam Lanza where you get the deformation. The stem cells you get the deformation in the skull, right? You're not seeing the later pictures of the kids. That's what's being withheld from you. And Adam Lanza was being peppered that there was some kind of experiment going on in this room, and he's being able to get back at the people who did this to him. His face is being contorted like a monster, right? And you see what I'm saying, Andy? That's not what he looked like when he was a little kid. And he's being told that the teachers in this room are the ones that are conducting this Yale experiment, right? That are causing these deformations in his skull, right? And in his face. They're feeding him this kind of poison, right? So I'm not saying he wasn't there. I'm not saying he didn't go into the classroom, but all 26 were there. All the 20 kids that had this kind of deformation. And it wasn't this easily visible with the other kids, by the way. But the spinal column perturbations were certainly with the other kids. But if you look at a young picture of Lanza, he doesn't look at anything like this at all. He looks very normal. Now he looks almost Martian-like or alien-like, right? And it's because they were doing some kind of gene therapy with the neural tube is defined at birth, when you're in the womb and so forth. But by inserting growth factor, right? And what I was told or led to believe was they were trying to do spinal cord repair. They were actually trying to use a polio or some kind of thing that they knew could infect the spinal cord that would deliver growth factor in the injured areas where you've had insults to the spine, right? So like the Christopher Reeve type injury where you've had a snappage and an impingement on the spine. And now what if you could surgically remove that area of impingement reduce the bone and then lay in neural growth factor on that area, sort of like filling in the pothole. Now, I don't know exactly if this is the experiment because I never was able to run it to ground. I only went up there, for a couple of days, right? And until Scott Pelley hit me with this 2 days before January 6th, he didn't hit Adam. He didn't hit Alex Jones with this. He hit me with this. I'm like, hey, I only had 2 days up there, when I was the one who said he had help, right? What are you hitting me with this for? But there must have been a reason CIA did that. The CIA had to have a reason to single me out with Sandy Hook, which I never had anything to do with other than saying Lanza had help. So it's starting me down the track to maybe my original thinking here, which was it was kind of fill in the pothole for spinal cord injuries. there was not a vascular endothelial growth factor. It wasn't VEGF, but it was this neural endothelial growth factor. I can't remember the name of the neural growth factor, but that seems to be what was being tested. And then it just went horribly awry. You can see these facial deformities. It went horribly awry. And it was cleaned up on aisle 7. I mean, they cleaned up everybody. I'm not saying it was Jordan Walker. I'm not saying it was Farkhouse. I'm not saying it was anybody that we've talked about with anthrax, or Callahan wearing the black bloc cleaning up all 26. But it's very unusual in a mass shooting to kill 26 and then to have 2 toenail injuries. You know, we have 2 toenail injuries of 2 of the teachers that closed the door basically and locked them in. Mm-hmm. And then we have 26 dead, nobody else injured. And then everybody goes to Yale, right? And all the Sandy Hook fire vehicles and everything are lined up perfectly 1 inch apart, and all the emergency vehicles are all lined up. That's not an emergency situation. They've been told, line up. We want to be able to count and make sure that none of your emergency vehicles are leaving the site. We're going to take care of the bodies, right? And so it seemed like a CIA cleanup operation. And when I found out that Bruce Ivins potentially had made a comment about this, and this is being suppressed by Scott Decker, that Bruce Ivins might have made a comment about the Sandy Hook testing, the anthrax testing at Yale, that became the thing I became very interested in. And again, it's because of you, Scott Pelley, and you coming at me when trying to pin Alex's story on me. And that's why I reported on this. I can't even remember. Yeah, you treated it. Yeah, I can't even remember what we were on originally, but I saw somebody saying the kids look normal, and they did. But look at Lanza's later pictures, and it gets worse. And again, this is pathophysiology, folks. This isn't me. I didn't go out and rent a studio and, meet with Adam Lanza for 4 years before Sandy Hook and give him weird growth factors for his spine to make him have all these facial aberrations. I didn't do that. It's there right in front of you in the photos. So somebody has to explain that. And if his mother, the theory was his mother told him he was a part of it, the experiment. She worked for DARPA. So again, this is the biggest crime. Anthrax 911 is the biggest crime ever in our history. And if Bruce Ivins is saying that Farkhouse is somehow connected with Sandy Hook, and the experiments are running right now, you can go over there right now and check this out, FBI, that these experiments are being run on informed testing on these kids right as we speak. You're eventually going to have to do cleanup on aisle 7 at Sandy Hook as these kids get older, right? As they start moving kids through this, program. Yeah, when their kids are young, and look at Lanza when he's young. He looks perfectly normal. He's in this same class of kids, by the way. All these kids kind of move through together. And the testing started on him. You'll see his last picture is when he's about 5 or 6. And then these contortions start happening in his skull. I cannot believe anyone wouldn't notice this. Any doctor, even nurse, looking at the pathophysiology, looking at how his skull changed over time, they'd all say, oh, there's something going on. There's some kind of experiment going on. There's some kind of stem cell experiment going on there, right? So anyway, there it is. I mean, again,
it says right here, medical experts at Yale University had called for drastic measures to help Adam Lanza in the years before he shot and killed 26 people at Sandy Hook. So he was being treated at Yale, and they told him some drastic measures need to be taken.
Yeah, but the part they're not saying is.
I'm saying they were treating them.
Yeah. But not just him, all the kids in that class. So again, this is something I think that they wouldn't have done this. And remember the guy who comes out and Scott Pelley, again, Scott Pelley does not go after Alex Jones 2 days before January 6th. He doesn't go after Tucker. He doesn't go after, James O'Keefe. Why me? Why me and why Sandy Hook, right? I think it's because I might have been on the right track at Sandy Hook, because I never did anything other than Sandy Hook, other than talk about this Yale thing, right? With the spinal column experiment. And it was only something I found out after 2 days of going up there and talking to people. So there has to be some reason, because 60 Minutes could not have gotten that story so backwards unless they were trying to cover something up. And when I learned that Ivins could have been saying, hey, wait a minute, Farkhouse was close to this. This is before the shooting with these Yale experiments for anthrax. Remember, Yale has come out with a breathable, inhalable anthrax vaccine and an inhalable influenza vaccine for the disease X that's coming. They're the ones that go to places like Yale and recruit people like Jordan Walker who say, I want to do nasty things for pharmaceutical companies. Right? Karl Rove is the one going and kissing him, not me, in 2011, the year before the Sandy Hook shootings. So I don't know, if cleaning up a horrible Yale anthrax experiment at Sandy Hook kind of sounds like a horrible thing you might do for a pharmaceutical company. Why can't we go back and ask these questions? Why can't we go back and ask James O'Keefe about the remdesivir paper with Boston Consulting Group? Why is that? Why can't we ask about Gavin Davies, who ran the BBC and took over for the Evercore investment group that was investing in all the anthrax newspapers and so forth, and did the 9/11 announcement that it was Osama bin Laden a minute after the plane hit? That's fast detective work, Ehud Barak. Seems like the Israelis and Israeli intelligence is in on it. So I don't know where you want to go from here, Andy. I got us off the track, but look at the pictures is all I can say at Sandy Hook. Look at the pictures.
And just to let all of you guys know on YouTube, when we get our channel taken down, we're talking about Sandy Hook. Make sure you go onto our Rumble at Neighborhood News Network, because
Andy,
that's the thing that got us taken down.
I know this is going to get us zapped, but you know, if let's say you went into a doctor, right, and you're the father of Adam Lanza, and you go, okay, well, he's got this alien look, where no chin, he looks like an alien. It's getting worse. You say, well, he's 17, let's say, or 18. I can't remember how old he was. Well, what did you look like at 15? Would you think that was a conspiracy theorist when the doctor put up his 15-year-old picture and then he has one of those light boxes, He goes, well, do you have a picture when he's 12? Okay, do you have a picture when he's 10? Do you have a picture when he's 8? Do you have a picture when he's 5? Do you have a picture when he's 3? Okay, now let's look at him. Normal, crazy, craziest. Well, you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to go, well, let's circle right here on the line where it goes from normal to crazy. What happened here? What happened right there? Right? And that's when anthrax was being used as a genetic therapy. They were trying to use anthrax as a genetic therapy. What does anthrax do? It goes to the lymph nodes. It punches through the dura, which is the thing that encases your spinal cord. They're currently using, by the way, polio, I think it's Yale, to vector in and eat brain tumors. There was an idea that you would put in a toxin, like a chemotherapy toxin, inside the polio virus to go take out brain tumors as a genetic therapy. That's currently happening right now, not my speculation. All those experiments that are happening now had precursors that you don't know about, right? You only see the latest one, and that's when 60 Minutes comes and says what a great investigative medical person this is, but you don't see all the experiments, right? So anyway, I'm just saying, and people are going to say it's conspiracy theory, but I'm just saying, why? I'm just thinking about it logically, like a doctor would, like a pathologist would. What do you got here, Andy?
I just put up on the screen just different incidents, or there were some anthrax cases in Connecticut, and they do seem to have there's another one where there's an old woman that got anthrax. They do seem to have some cases breaking out there, and to me that suggests
Western African drum making. I saw Western African drum making.
Yeah, Western African drum maker, and then there was an old woman that got it also.
I've been, I've been to Connecticut a lot, and I went up there with task force, and I I went to a lot of those shops, those Yankee, candle type shops and whatnot. Not a lot of African drum making going on there. Just saying. What do you got here, Andrew?
There's also so this is just a weird one I found. Inhalation anthrax associated with dried animal hides in Pennsylvania and New York City in 2006. So it's like that's like they were working on some animals in the lab and dumped them in the forest, it seems like, or something like that.
Well, opium paste in Afghanistan, the way it's made, one of the natural side effects is anthrax poisoning, because anthrax is in the ground, right? And then they use animal hides for holding the opium paste, and it absorbs the anthrax. So this has been around since Skull and Bones was running the opium trade, with anthrax getting in the opium. I mean, this is an old problem. You can look into this. So this is something that even the first founders of Yale would have had to deal with. This isn't something that just happened with Bruce Ivins or Sandy Hook. It's Sandy Hook, New York, when it was a harbor in New York, with British soldiers worrying about this, when they were using opium for a analgesic, for a painkiller. Sandy Hook, like New Jersey, right? And then what was happening was the anthrax from the field operations of making this was getting in the rope and getting in the hides that they used to make the opium. This has been around the Pottinger family, Lord Pottinger, and Hong Kong, and the trade concession in Wuhan, and the trade concession in Singapore, and the Harding Matheson Bank for 350 years, 325 years. So this isn't new. So Yale being involved with anthrax and using anthrax for gene therapy for Yale Medical is not out of the question. Now, the only problem is where are you going to do it? Well, you live in a remote part of Connecticut. It's where one of the anthrax victims was. There's no connective tissue from a letter going up there. The only thing we know is Bruce Ivins said that Farkhouse was the person who provided him the cut and dried anthrax to aerosolize the monkeys. He didn't touch it. Farkhouse was the guy who did it, and Farkhouse is right down the street from Farkhouse's mother is the victim. Bruce Ivins said that November 2001. Now, did Bruce Ivins, that's two things Bruce Ivins said. There was a 10-point list. Did Bruce Ivins talk about Sandy Hook? I just want to know. Scott Decker, if you're out there listening, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Just produce the 8 things that you suppressed. That's all I'm asking. Go ahead.
All right. I do have a special guest. That is, I officially guilted him to come on the show, George Webb. After much anticipation, the Neighborhood News Hour founder, Mr. Aaron Adler himself. Aaron, how you doing today? You're muted.
You're muted.
There you go. You're definitely muted, Aaron.
I think the glove, the iPhone works on heat, so I think he needs to touch it with his hand. So you got to take your glove off. Go ahead, Aaron.
Oh, he's out somewhere too. We can't hear you, Mr. Adler. Take your headphones out.
And turn your camera sideways.
Okay. Oh, he's going to come back in.
He'll come back in.
This is why Aaron Adler's not running the board.
All right. But you get the idea. He's in a remote area, right? Mm-hmm. He's in a place that's cold and it's remote. Nobody wants to travel there in the wintertime. It's cold. It's at the end of this river. You saw the little river there in the shot, right? It's a little tiny school. And if somebody says something, it's mainly a town of tradespeople and farmers. They're not all professors at Yale working on anthrax, so they wouldn't know these things that are happening to their kids. Right? They're just taking their kids to the Yale Medical Center for whatever's happening. It's kind of like the perfect environment. And I looked over here at Stoneman Douglas, and I say the same thing about Stoneman Douglas kids with Zika and all the mosquitoes. It's just a mosquito. It's like a mosquito moat, literally, Andy, but hundreds of mosquito moats around Stoneman Douglas. And I'm thinking, Virginia Benassi would love this place. And again, we're not talking about something that didn't exist. Operation Mongoose did exist here. They're still trying to genetically modify the male mosquitoes here to make them more attractive to females, to get rid of the old mongoose mosquitoes that are still in Florida. The Bill Gates Mosquito Project is to get rid of those original mongoose mosquitoes, those Aegypti, which are not native. I talked to the guy who actually is doing the abatement. West Nile fever and dengue in Florida. Go ahead, Andy.
I think this is attempt number 2. Aaron Adler, we're bringing you on camera here. I think he's doing little spins with this camera. All
Can you block for Travel Scout 77? That's the person who's promoting. Go ahead, Aaron.
Hey guys, I think you can hear me this time. I hope we're doing better. Sounding good. We're here in Ann Arbor, Michigan today at the Google offices. Just want to make sure that we, are clear with Google that we love YouTube. We love the platform. We hope they'll let us stay this time. I hear they whacked us. They whacked us pretty fast last time. I'm sure it's all because of that curiosity over that school in Connecticut and the public relations team that teamed up with the Benassis so many years ago to work together with Scott Pelley and 60 Minutes and all the rest. But just me personally, I have no special information regarding any of that. The YouTube channel can stay this time, but Google, we do appreciate the YouTube product, and we're here just to make sure they know that. So moving on, we're here in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Everyone, welcome. Great show so far, as always, guys. Sorry I haven't been able to join too much recently. Mark Buckley, the great Mark Buckley, here with me. He can't hear you though; he's just walking with me. So Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Home of the Michigan Wolverines, NCAA football champions, and close to where Paul Whelan and the Russians are running little PSYOP counterintelligence programs.
And while I have your ear, before my connection may go away again, we'll be announcing the next charrette coming up in Michigan. It'll be the weekend before the primary, so 24th of February. We've got some videos to premiere, some January 6th oriented videos. We still haven't gotten that check from Patrick Byrne yet, but we're waiting any day now. And because of Antifa concerns, so many concerns with Antifa and all the other groups out there, we're gonna have to keep the location TBD for the showing of the films that we'll be showing that day. We'll be showing some of George's live footage from Jan 6, George and Andy and the team, and some other videos. George has done some interviews lately with some Jan 6 documentarians, and so we'll be playing those videos. And if anybody wants to get involved in the primary season, of course, now it's just down to Trump and Nikki Haley, I guess, for the most part. So a little bit of juice has been taken out of that, or maybe juice is added in. I don't know. But February 24th, 23rd, 24th, 25th, I believe would be the dates there, or maybe. The primary is the 24th. I'm sorry. So it'll be 20th, 21st, 22nd. I think the 21st is the Saturday before the primary. It's a little cold out here. But
okay.
Yeah,
we'll let you get warm.
Sounds
cold.
But it's cold.
Ann Arbor Public Library. It's okay. We're making it. But so we may be doing the blind pig. I don't know. We're here in Ann Arbor. We may book the blind pig for that weekend, but let George or Andy or myself know if you want to attend, and that'll be the next Michigan charrette.
That's awesome.
Ann Arbor Library there. So
neighborhoodnewsstudio@gmail.com. Give us an email if you want to attend the charrette. As you know, George and the team like to travel around and do break different stories that are going on, or investigate some stuff that mainstream media has left untouched. We know neighborhood news is the home of citizen journalism, and we need the boots on the ground to make that happen. And there's no better person to learn from than George Webb. You see me going around, traveling around, doing my little videos. I just copy off the big man himself, our big man, George Webb, and follow suit. And the more citizen journalists we have around the country, digging into this research and breaking stories, the more it will be exposed.
I'll be chiming in more and more. Myself and other correspondents from the field will be chiming in, segments as the Neighborhood News Hour continues on, or the Neighborhood News Network continues on. So I'll be chiming in more and more and coming at you from Carmadoc's farm as well soon. We'll have a studio going up there. So lots of exciting things happening in Michigan. So that's the update for today.
All right, as an Ohio State fan, Aaron, make sure you go and spray some of that anthrax around that Michigan campus there, so we can seal a victory maybe for the first time in 4 years now.
We're kidding. Yeah.
We're kidding. Yeah, of course we're kidding. And today, I thought today, the best, with the first neighborhood news a couple of years ago was, Google and YouTube really tried to kill us on the launching pad. I mean, they canceled us 29 times or 28 times or however many it was. And we don't want to get into a tug of war with them this time. Free speech is the best. And we love their platform. It's a great video streaming platform. And I thought the Google offices here in Ann Arbor would be a good place to say hi from today. So here they are. We love them. And we don't need to battle Google. Just trying to fight the deep state here, everyone. Although I guess they may be a part of that, but So,
Go and slip them a heavy envelope. Maybe we can get to stay on a couple.
No. I'm here on the public sidewalk, not going anywhere past this public sidewalk. That's for sure.
Throw an egg then.
Oh well. All right, guys.
Thanks,
I'll check in next show. Yep, I'll see you on Wednesday.
All right, see you.
Take care.
That's awesome. Well, that'll be fun. That'll be fun to go to Michigan. And for those who don't know the background, I mean, there's this guy named Stoughton at NSA. He worked at DARPA. And he sent half of his family after me, tracking and tracing me when I go to the hijacker hotel, because I think that's where the devices were given to the hijackers, right? His daughter's there at 3 a.m. Right. So NSA and Stoughton's daughter is there in the parking lot watching me. NSA is watching me, not far from NSA, by the way, where they got the hijackers got the BlackBerry. So of course you have trolls. And the daughter told me there was 6 or 7 of her family members that were involved in this, that all worked at NSA. So it doesn't surprise me at all. And then she said, we have friends working with MI6. It doesn't surprise me I have people like Brian Ball, right, tracking me from MI6. Of course you're going to have. Why are they here, right? Why are they here and not on Alex Jones' show? Or why are they here and not on James O'Keefe's show? Why is the NSA here in such numbers that we know personally and spent years with, right? Took me to all the Navy bases, tried to get me killed with Ken Hale, taking me to a Navy base late at night. Why are they here? They're here for a good reason. They don't want this information getting out, right? Otherwise, they would just say, have at it, go for it. And why over 7 years? Why over 7 years? Because it is the secret of how the hijackers got encrypted communication. Think about it. There's no way they could have got away with it. Cynthia McKinney said, even on September, U.S. military industrial complex spending trillions of dollars on intelligence gathering. Right? John Brennan has a desk in Saudi Arabia at Saudi intelligence. Half of the kids started up through Saudi Arabian intelligence, the pilots. How wouldn't they know about that with a trillion spent? 4 different warnings for September 11th, before September 11th at the intelligence agencies that all had to be ignored. That's why NSA is here. Because they know they didn't do the intercept when they easily could have done the intercept. They knew that they couldn't admit that they had intercepted all of these communications. Think about these guys running around. They're not being discreet. They're going to strip clubs. You remember Iranians who can't speak English that are doling out the 20s and have a stripper or girlfriends with purple hair, right? That's why. You wouldn't have had eyes on these people who can't fly planes and they don't want to learn how to land. And they're going to all these different places. They're trying to get into simulators at Opelika, right? To fly Boeing simulators. And yet they don't work for a commercial pilot. You just walk in the door. You're not a pilot yet. You've never flown a Cessna. You've never flown a Piper Cub. And you're going to start today with a 727 in Opelika. Would the guy running the sim over at Opelika go, hey, you know what? That doesn't sound right. I think I'm going to call the FBI. How about those guys flying in formation? Like Hopsker told us, 6 planes flying in formation, going round and round with crop dusters, going round and round. Remember, the Congress is meeting at this time in the summer, talking about crop dusters spraying anthrax, and they're doing the anthrax formation going around and around in Venice, and nobody's going to pick up the phone and call them. And Rudy Decker somehow at Huffman Aviation doesn't see them going round and round. It's a small airport. Again, I've been to the airport 15 times, right? It's a small airport. The reason why the NSA is here is because they know their ass is grass on this. They should have intercepted this communication. It should have been foiled way, way, way before anybody got in the plane, right? Way before, right? We know that Otto was a Duisburg scholar. We know he's doing touch and goes over here in Lantana Airport, right? With the guy who's running American media where the first anthrax attack is. That's where Bob Stevens, the first victim, is. It's simple, connect the dots. And again, this is what the FBI should have done. What happens now is the FBI accuses me of conspiracy theory when I'm just doing what they should have done, which is ABC 101 crime solving. Who, what, when, where, how, and why. Means, motive, opportunity. Cui bono. Right? These are simple questions that I'm asking, and then their response is to shower us with NSA trolls. And then we're not guessing. These people, Stoughton did work at NSA, did work at DARPA. Not guessing. He's got a whole family at DARPA. They've sent them out here. Ball's family from Oxford, professor at Oxford. That's who's coming here to troll. They're not going to say it, but we know who they are. So why?
I tried blocking them. They're on Twitter, so the YouTube or Rumble chat can't see what they're posting. It's only just
you got to go to Twitter to block them, Andy.
Yeah, I tried finding. I got too many accounts on Twitter. I don't know which channels.
We'll figure it out later. But I'm just saying their presence, and the reason why they know so much about us, and a lot of the facts are wrong. The reason why they know so much is because Stoughton worked at NSA and he worked at DARPA. Notice how it's DARPA. It's not just anybody coming after us. It's the people at DARPA. Could writing a book, World War DARPA, have anything to do with that? Yeah, I think so. Right? This is why you don't have anybody. Why is Alex getting a free pass? He's broadcasting right now. We're going to get whacked. We've already had a couple of episodes whacked here. And we're seeing exactly the opposite of what Alex said about Sandy Hook, but he's back. But our 2 episodes were whacked for saying, hey, we actually went up and did the interviews and there was all these neural deficiencies in these spinal cords of these kids. That should tell you something. And NSA is here. They're not over there. Where's James O'Keefe today? Not doing anything, right? Where's Tucker Carlson today? He's defaming Cynthia McKinney 22 years ago, and cutting out key things that she's saying and editing and slicing out important quotes that she's saying that contextualize her quote. So I'm just saying, just think it through, and it makes a lot of sense why they're here and why they're not there. Even though we're small, truth is a lot more of a threat than the stuff they're doing.
Yeah, so. I mean, we're small because at this point we're made to be kept small. We only have our little email list that we send out. We have our like faithful, loyal followers that just continue following you no matter how many times you get banned. You're right. We aren't Tucker Carlson. We aren't Alex Jones. We don't have that far widespread. I don't think they let us get in the algorithms like that at this point, George Webb. But thank God we see at the WEF, we see the United Nations and the EU. They're trying to limit free speech and shut us down. And at least, thank God, we do have Twitter, so we can at least unabashedly kind of say what we want and broadcast our shows on their platform. But
why did Jason pixelate the encrypted communications for 6 years? Why did he hide the Biden BlackBerry guy that everybody said didn't exist, and then he produced the picture, and then everybody, like all the MI6 guys like Ryan Baum, whatever, they all said, well, I'll take back everything I said about George. He actually did talk to Deep BlackBerry. He was a Biden advisor, and oh yeah, those did have Senate markings. Oopsie. Right? Why did Jason pixelate that for 6 years? Why did he pixelate the picture of Deep BlackBerry, the Biden advisor, for 6 years? Is that moving the DNC lawsuit that I did forward, or is it hurting? It's hurting, right? They're doing the same thing now with trying to trip us up on disease X. They're going off on this H7N9 thing when it's H5N1. Why? You got to answer these questions, right? So learn a little bit about the science would be my first thing to those guys. And the second thing I would say is focus in on the things that are threats and not the things that are threats to chicken farmers. If some chicken farmers die from H7N9, that's all right. That's not going to kill 20 million people. When you're doing gain of function, trying to aerosolize things that kill 20 million people, and the people who are talking about the next influenza, like Storr, right? They're talking about this and saying it's 20 million. So we're in violent agreement with what Storr is saying about H5N1. He's not saying that about H7N9. Why are they pushing H7N9 when they don't even know what H7N9 is? These are questions. You have to make decisions. And why are they asking for money? They should be paying you money. Why are they wanting you to pay their pot bills? You know, why they should be paying you money. You deserve a rebate if you are following those guys.
All right, they are officially blocked.
There you go.
I figured out how to do it on Twitter finally, so we won't be having the Twitter troll interrupting anymore. It is kind of annoying. You you're trying to do a show and then you got someone in the chat just bringing up a bunch of like BS and it's stuff that's not true, and then you like feel the need to like just kind of set the record straight, and then they are kind of successful because we're getting into stuff and they bring the show to a little bit of a halt, and it's just like, damn it.
No. let me deal with this because they're bringing it up. I'm here for Imran Awan. Imran Awan worked directly for a guy who had a bio lab in Pakistan named Rahm Emanuel, okay, and diverting funds and diverting wartime technologies to Rahm Emanuel so that he could sell that to other nations that had bioweapons ambitions and potentially give it to the DHS and use it for people like Antifa and like these Russians they keep bringing in every election cycle, which is a direct threat to the people of the United States of America. He worked for W. Watson and Schultz and the DNC. I sued them, right? He's here for Imran Awan. Guess who paid his legal bills? Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, right? And the Clinton Foundation was the one investing in these technologies. So he's here for Hillary Clinton, right? He's here for Imran Awan. Bring it on. I've been going after Imran Awan for 6 years. You notice he fled the country, and all the whole spy ring fled the country when I came after them. What did I come after him with? My knowledge, right? And our research network. That's what drove these sons of bitches out of this country. And now they're trying to come back in and hit us with another disease X, right? And we got to stop it, right? So if you're here for Imran Awan, I'm glad you're here because I got a message for you. We're on to your game. We're on to your DNC tricks. We're on to your disease X's. We're going to expose it before it happens, okay? You can take that message back to Imran. So there you go, Andrew.
All right, Imran Awan. Just we do got a couple minutes left in the show. There is actually another. We've been getting into live exercises and disease X lately. There is another, the biggest NATO drill since Cold War to start next week, and it is Operation Steadfast Defender 2024. And we've seen some of these NATO drills happen in the past. A little bit afterwards, you know, pipelines start blowing up and some weird things start happening around these NATO drills and NATO operations. What do you see on the forefront after this NATO drill is up and running?
Well, a blackout would be is a valid military way to go. Cutting the supply of food, cutting the supply of energy, cutting electricity, cutting access to the internet, blaming it on a Antifa or whatever kind of group or Muslim group like Muslim Brotherhood or whatever would be the way to go. So, yeah, it's always nice to have the terrorist trolls actually, because it tells you what the terrorists are thinking and they want to shut us down. And so these type of exercises, they're not trying to win your votes. Those machine guns and those armored vehicles tell you that they think you are the enemy, right? And they're riding against you, right? When NATO comes here, they're riding against you. And that's the important piece here to remember. And they're not going to use.
And that's what Cynthia McKinney and all these Patriot groups that they're, and for PATCON, that's who they're investigating. That's what we all think the blue helmets are going to come into the U.S. and to start like taking away our rights. That's what we're worried about because we see it happen time and time again around the world.
But the first wave won't be like this kinetic type thing. This is the stuff they demonstrate with, but it'll all be Imran Awan types living in safe houses called the sprayer house, right? Ken Mormon, who ran the Maxwell Air Force Base bioweapons program, or worked in it anyway, was murdered in that house. Why is this guy standing up for a murder of Ken Mormon, the guy who worked over at the bioweapons Air Force program in Maxwell Air Force Base? You got to wonder what Ken Mormon knew that we didn't, but these are the people that are running in and out of Fort Belvoir, where they're doing the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. That's where our vaccine technology is coming from. We talked about this in 2017 at the front gates of Fort Belvoir, numerous times. We said this is where the next disease X is coming from, right? So why we have the cheering section for disease X here, right? It should tell you something.
And yeah, I'm sorry, you troll. I thought I blocked your troll in the chat. They're still rolling somehow. They must have went over to the other.
They're great talking points for me because look, the DARPA people everywhere you look, everybody who's enticed me to work with them is pixelating the key evidence in the case against the DNC. You can't tell me if you're trying to knock down key evidence, a key witness, a key fact. Evidence, you're pixelating it or withholding it completely for 6 years. You can't say you're against the DNC. You've been aiding and abetting the DNC for 6 years. And now you want to go and aid and abet them and obfuscate their next attack, which is the disease X attack. We just saw Tedros and the whole gang say, Bill Gates and the whole gang and the NATO gang say disease X is the next big thing. They've all said H5N1. Redfield, everyone along the way said H5N1. So all we're trying to do is get the American people ready for H5N1. Why do we have the NSA trolls? Why do we have the English trolls? Give me the thumbs up, Andy. I love that thumbs up. That's why, because they don't want you to know.
Yep, and here's John Hopkins working on it too. Disease X Medical Countermeasure Program. John Hopkins for Disease X. But who do you think? We got a couple minutes left. We've seen some of these. We've been talking about like the FBI infiltrating groups and stuff, trying to push their directives. Same thing with NATO as well. Who do you think Trump's vice president pick is going to be? Do you think it's going to be Mr. Ramaswamy? Do you think it's going to be Nikki NATO, DeSanctimonious, or just some like Sarah Huckabee Sanders, a curveball in there? I don't know who it's going to be. Who do you think Trump's going to pick for his VP? Because we as a country are very worried that he doesn't pick one of these like infiltrator people that are going to lead them in the wrong direction.
I would pick somebody, the old LBJ strategy, pick somebody from Texas or pick somebody from one of the big states, swing states that you need really badly. I like Ramaswamy because he could go to all the places like Ann Arbor, right, where Trump's looking to get 90. Only 10% of the vote. And if he gets that up to 30% of the vote, if he gets the college vote up to 30%, it's over. The election's over because the Democrats count on those areas. So Ann Arbor, that's why we go to Ann Arbor to do these charrettes. National champion, University of Michigan, we go right into the Lions Den, right? Or the Wolverines Den. We're not afraid like that ad, what's a Wolverine? That's why they don't have a mask on. We're not afraid. We go in, right? We go into the Wolf's Den. So I think, Ramaswamy would be helpful for that. It's hard to trust Ramaswamy, obviously. That's the big factor. Kristi Noem in South Dakota, I think would add something just because I'm going to go choose somebody who is not going to win me a state. I'm going to go choose somebody who's the best person for the best person for the job. I'm going to choose.
If you pick George Webb, if he gave you a phone call and was like, "Hey George, I'm watching neighborhood news. I know, like, I like what you're saying. You seem to be on top of stuff. I think you can offer me some good direction." Do you think you would go ahead and do it, George Webb?
No, but I would be on his National Security Council and call out the rats as they were infiltrating. That would be fun.
Do you
But
think there's a plan in place to, like, kind of like the first time around, he didn't have anyone like kind of like yourself around that he would bring into the inner circle? Do you think there's a plan in place to kind of make that happen, to like bring some of these outside people in a little bit more this time around? Because that would be great if you would be on the National Security Council, like some of these other people out there that like a McDuff I would take on there, like,
well,
that would be awesome.
I've spent a lot of time suing the DNC and spending a lot of my own money exposing the DNC. So you have cheerleaders for the DNC and cheerleaders for crime. Take all the money we spend in Afghanistan, launder it through the DNC, and pay back and create encrypted communications in a shadow network on our Capitol Hill. You got cheerleaders for them, right? Why can't we have somebody who calls out the illegal networks? And 11 of them, Andy, were Israeli citizens, dual citizens. How is that allegiance to the United States? So you have to know where these networks are. You have to know where the shadow network is. You have to expose these things for the president, right? If you're not doing that, you're doing the president a disservice, and he's allowing a shadow network to cast a pall over Capitol Hill. And that makes everything more difficult when you have another nation or two infusing themselves with encrypted communications. Your NSA is more worried about trolling us here today, right, than breaking the encrypted communication of third-party foreign actors. That's happening live on this show as we're talking right now, right? You want somebody on your team that can call that shit out, right? You want somebody on your team that can call that shit out. Dan Scavino started out as a caddy for Trump, right? And he has a lot of aptitude for social media. And I told Dan, I'll help. I can help a lot. I've been working against the DNC for 7 years, in the trenches, in the courts. So I can, and CNN, I can help out a lot, right? Those are the kind of people that you want around as kind of guards or lookouts or scouts or whatever, right? You want a vice president who has been successful already, who's a proven elected leader already, who's been through all the, all that stuff. And I think Kristi Noem in South Dakota, some people say the guy in Lamar in Texas. But the thing is, you don't want to take somebody out of a job where they're helping you.
What about a Cynthia McKinney? What if you brought a Cynthia McKinney on board? Would you like that?
Probably too much baggage there with the Israel lobby, and she would be attacked like she was before. But
Kushner would be butting heads all the time.
yeah, I think there would be some friction there. But I could see. I would hope that it would be a governor, somebody who's had executive experience, so that if Trump did, for some reason, get assassinated or get health alteration committee or some kind of CIA action against him, that person could go in. I think the gal from who was running in Arizona, all of a sudden I'm forgetting her name, who ran against
Carrie Lake.
Carrie Lake, I think may be a good second choice. I like Kristi Noem because you want somebody who's going to have the conservative values that matches the president, who's going to be tough and be every bit as tough as the president, because otherwise you just kill him, right? And then you put your person in. If it's
you got to have someone of similar values in there, or else you put your Nikki Haley in, NATO is just gonna be like, hey, Trump, disease X.
yeah, and then you get America Last. You get America Last in 10 minutes. Like you say, and now we got Nikki Haley. So yeah, I would really look to somebody who had those same conservative values, that also is a proven leader, at the gubernatorial. And that's why I say having governor experience would be much better than somebody who's just been a state rep or a U.S. rep. You're only seeing a slice of the action as a rep, whereas a statewide executive, you have to make some big decisions that go across, and you have a cabinet, big departments and so forth, big budgets. So yeah, I think that would be good.
What are, I guess, last question, what are, as your national security advisor, what's your plan of action? What's your first three things you're going to tell Trump to do? Like as a presidential, you know, he comes in and he starts signing presidential, what are they called, declarations or whatever, immediately his first day in office. What are the first three things you're telling him to do to get this country on the right track?
Well, I would sign a loyalty oath to the Constitution, that you hold the U.S. Constitution above all others, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Any misgiving to any foreign power, any allegiance to any foreign power, you deny it specifically as a foreign, as a person. If you can't sign that, you're fired, right? Because that's the same oath I sign when I become president. You can't sign that oath, you're out. Right, that would be probably the first thing I would do, a loyalty oath, and I would look at real hard at places like NSA, because if you allow a secret network to be operating underneath your feet, undermining you all the time, it's sort of like you building a bridge and then you got somebody at night, you know, undermining, right, knocking out the pins that you of the work you did, or at a construction site, you know, sawing the beams as you put them in.
And you can't come in and just like cut off the funding and abolish the NSA and like parts of the CSA and FBI and it kind of go away, or would there just be major backlash and all sorts of news and misinformation? Would like, what are they all just like, okay, I was just doing my job? Or
I would
they
mandate.
Yeah.
I would mandate the president knows about all secret projects. So there is no Q level clearance anymore that the president doesn't know about. So if Kennedy signed something, right, and let's say it was bioweapons for Operation Mongoose, you can't keep that program going 60 years without the knowledge of the president, right? So you have to say, okay, bring them all to the table. Let's have a national security conference where we bring all the secret things to the table and lay it all out, and the president has veto power on every program, right? So if we're still running Mongoose from 62 under Q level clearance with only need to know among the actors, and Clinton has said this, other people have said this, the president doesn't know everything then. The president should know everything and have oversight on everything. The other thing, Andy, the last thing I would say is just a massive declassification of documents. There's way too many documents. Any document that's more than 10 years old, right, I would immediately say, unless it's DOD, declass. And then I would take the DOD programs and I would go through and I would start saying, okay, reduce it from top secret now to secret, and remove redactions and go from secret to classified and so forth. Because the only people getting them right now are the people that have operatives like Imran Awan sitting on our intelligence committees, listening into the intelligence committee, the Armed Forces Service Committee, the Foreign Affairs Committee, right? They're the ones that are getting all that information, and the American people and the DOD isn't. You know, Debbie Wasserman Schultz had the back channel terabytes to Pakistan, right? They were laundering all that information out for these dual citizens that we had in Congress, these 45 folks. And we got people in here with, you know, the Stoughton crowd, right, which is kicking and screaming as NSA, tear down George Webb, come up with any kind of thing to undermine George Webb. But it should be about me. It should be about the Constitution. It should be about the preserving our way of life, things we fought for, right, and putting in a candidate that we choose. How about that, you know, in our election process? So that I guess those are very simple things I would do that are not directed at any one person, just general fundamental things I think we could do to ensure our democracy.
All right, and Andy's next step would be we need to do something about like relaying information. You're talking about all this classified documents. We need a actual way to relay this information to the public in a truthful manner without it being just without us being lied to constantly. There does need to some citizen journalist corporation or something like that within that's involved with MSM. But all right, George Webb, our 2 hours is up. You will be on Peter Duke on the Duke Report Tuesday at 5 p.m. We will be back Monday at 12 p.m. Eastern live on Neighborhood News Network. Once again, to all our YouTube audience, make sure you go sign up for the Rumble Channel Neighborhood News Network as well. Thank you, George Webb. You got any closing thoughts? And you just want to say see you to everyone?
Yeah, I think we go back and we edit and we figure out how to clear the disruptions, and we get back about the business of the people. Who cares about I wasn't the one running around buying $200 Kobe steak dinners for me and $200 steak dinners for my Tinder date. Okay, $400. No, listen to this thing. If you buy a $400 Kobe steak for you and a $400 Kobe steak dinner for your date, and then whatever you have in terms of drinks and whatnot, and I'm
broke.
Right. Not me. I'm talking about somebody I used to work with. Isn't that kind of like you're paying for the evening? Isn't that kind of like you're paying for the evening? Just saying. That's where the money was going, right? And I was like, hey, you're getting on me for buying a coffee, right? I just went out and bought a coffee, and that's why I'm just saying. $400. Look at the receipts.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why the attacks are coming is look at the receipts, right? Look at the receipts. Look at what I was spending the money for, which was coffee, and look at the Kobe steak and see who was buying which. I wasn't in New York when the Kobe steaks were happening and the Tinder dating was happening, right? Just look at the receipts. There's a lot of criticism, but people don't realize those are the people that are writing $400. And I'm talking about one Kobe steak for one person, $400, and the Tinder date's $400, and then the bill's, $1,000 plus. That's what I'm talking about. And I'm getting locked out for a $5 coffee. There you go.
That's how the world spins, George. That's how the world spins nowadays. All right, ladies and gentlemen.
Back on Wednesday.
We'll be back on Wednesday. Go follow George Webb on Twitter at RealGeorgeWebb1. Make sure you scroll to the top of his page and click those links to donate him a coffee, support him via PayPal, or subscribe.
When your Tinder date costs you $1,000, Andy,
mm-hmm.
When your evening costs you, that's more than just your Kobe steak. You know what I mean? There's an understanding there that there's more. I'm just saying, okay. Follow the receipts. If you want to get to the root of the evil, follow the receipts. Okay, we'll leave it right there.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, at Real George Webb on Twitter. We will be back on Wednesday at noon Eastern. And remember, blackberries matter.
Started seeing like blackberries, government issued blackberries, government issued blackberries, government issued blackberries. They were blackberries. Man, this looks like government issued equipment. Man, this looks like government issued equipment. Man, this looks like government issued equipment.